We'll be taking calls shortly, but Jen's got something to educate us all about right quick.
Yeah, I wanted to talk briefly today about ad hominem attacks because I see people throwing that out there all too often, apparently without really understanding what that means. Okay, some people seem to be thinking that an ad hominem attack is when someone calls you a name you don't like. So, I may think that Matt is an asshat, but that says absolutely nothing about, his argument. And in fact, that's not an ad hominem attack. That's actually one step lower than an ad hominem attack. It's just plain name calling. Okay? An ad hominem attack is something that attacks the person instead of the argument. So, for example, I was engaged in an online debate with atheists, actually on the TV list on email. It's been several years ago. And the guy got apparently mad at me or something and decided to dismiss my argument by claiming that I only thought that way because I was just an angry middle-aged woman. And it's like, okay. If he thought he was insulting me, he was incorrect because I don't think there's anything particularly wrong about being legitimately angry with something, nor is there anything wrong with being middle-aged.
Yeah, so he could have just been right.
Yeah.
If that was in fact your only reason, which I doubt it was.
Yeah.
But.
And so, that's an example of an ad hominem attack. It's also not an ad hominem attack to point out that someone might have a conflict of interest. Often that's relevant in determining whether they are objective and impartial about what they're presenting, or if they have some other reason why they can't be regarded as completely objective about something. And I've got a couple of examples here that I want to use to illustrate when something is and is not an ad hominem attack. Okay. So in the first one, when Andrew Wakefield published his now debunked study that claimed that the MMR vaccine caused autism, among other things, a reporter uncovered evidence that Wakefield was at that time working on a measles vaccine that would have been a competitor to the measles component of the MMR. So is it an ad hominem attack to note that he had a conflict of interest in this case? Okay. The answer, of course, is no, it wasn't an ad hominem attack. The fact that Wakefield had a conflict of interest that he did not disclose is very relevant when evaluating the credibility of his claims. So it shouldn't have been the sole component in evaluating that because it wasn't and isn't evidence that his claims were untrue. But it should increase our skepticism about those claims. He had a motive to present evidence that attacked the MMR. It turns out that science actually demonstrated that his claims were untrue. So the next question is, if we call Wakefield dishonest, is that an ad hominem attack? The answer is no. He lied. He was, in fact, dishonest, and he was ultimately stripped of his medical license as a result of that. Okay. The second example I have here is there was a guy named Daniel Carlton Gajdusek, I think that's the name, that's the pronunciation. He was a physician and a medical researcher at the NIH, and he was awarded a Nobel Prize in physiology or medicine in 1976 for his work on Kuru. Kuru is a prion disease, similar to mad cow disease. This was the first prion disease that was demonstrated to be infectious. And it was a result of Gajdusek's work that led people to understand that these were infectious diseases. 20 years later, Gajdusek was convicted on 12 counts of sexually molesting children. He was a pedophile. He saw nothing wrong with that. So the question here, given that his professional work provided him the opportunity to bring 56 children to the U.S., ostensibly for education, and then molested them, based on that, can we now dismiss his professional work? Okay? If you do, you've committed the ad hominem fallacy. The fact that he was a pedophile has absolutely nothing to do with the validity of his medical research. So in this case, he may be a terrible person, and he actually is a pedophile, but that doesn't invalidate his work.
Yeah, it's about, somebody's made a claim, let's address the claim, and we need the information relevant to the claim. And you can say, you're an asshole, and here's why your argument's wrong,
Yes.
by the way,
Yeah.
and you haven't committed any fallacy.
Right.
But if you say that you're wrong, or that your research is wrong because you've done these evil things, whether they're true or not, then that's where the fallacy comes in.
Yeah, exactly. And, we see this all the time. People will say, oh, you're just an atheist because you want to sin. Okay, I might want to sin, but that's not why I'm an atheist.
I'm actually kind of embracing that lately. Beth and I talked about this, and she made a really good point, which is that's probably a reason why quite a few people give up religion and begin as atheists. And I don't think that there's anything necessarily wrong with it, because one of the things that comes up is this deal with sexuality and sex, and so the church is saying something that is against your very nature, and you may not have actually sat down and sussed this out and found the fallacy or sorted things through, and it may be more instinctive, but it's not something that we should just,
Right.
You're only an atheist because you want to sin, because quite frankly, that's a pretty good reason to not believe that something is true if it goes against your nature. It's not something that we're going to see, in academic circles probably debating the existence of God. Well, God says I can't do this and I want to. That's not it.
Well, certainly, if the implication of you committing some sin is that you are now a horrible person and, somehow unworthy of, salvation or whatever it is the religion is offering you.
Yeah.
I think that's certainly a good reason to reject that religion.
Yeah, basically they're rejecting it, saying, I don't believe you. You have not sufficiently
Right.
made your case. And they may not be saying it in those terms, but
Right.
yeah, by all means. And by the way, it's, as somebody who rejects the very concept of sin and this idea that you could offend a God, or that it matters if you offended a God, or that offense is somehow a wrong. I don't know. If two people are engaged in an activity and nobody else is harmed, it seems that religion is saying, but there is somebody else harmed. This being up here who's all-powerful has been harmed by this thing that shouldn't actually harm anybody.
Yes.
That's kind of dishonest. So if you make that kind of argument, it's a bad argument for the reasons we stated, and you might be an asshole. But I'm just saying. Anyway, did you have more?
No, I was just going to add that if you go on and you refute someone's claims, and then you add on to that, and by the way, you're an asshole. The name calling may be gratuitous, but if you've actually refuted their argument, then it's still not an ad hominem.
It's not a fallacy.
Yeah.
May not always be the best thing, and that's before we get to calls real quick, let me just kind of ping this because tone trolling is going to come up over and over again. And people will point to different reactions. Well, first of all, that I've had on the show. Well, first of all, I'm human, so I'm prone to making mistakes. There's more than one occasion where I've had to apologize for digging in on something or flat out mistreating someone. But also, there's a time and a place for righteous indignation and anger. There's a time and a place for ridicule, and I think that some ideas are deserving of ridicule by definition.
Yes.
And that some people may only be responding to ridicule. I don't advocate ridicule and egregious name calling and stuff as a first response. But come on, if I spent 45 minutes explaining to you exactly what's wrong with Pascal's wager, and we can't even begin to get past the starting point, sometimes I'm probably going to drop a name because I've already put in my work.
Yeah.
But
well, and
it's never a goal. People are like, oh, I love watching the show because you make Christians look stupid. No, actually, they provide whatever argument, and they do or don't look stupid entirely on their own merit. It's not my goal to make anybody look stupid or feel bad. It's my goal to be kind of honest, and sometimes honesty gets rough.
Well, not only that, but anyone who calls the show has the option of remaining anonymous.
Yeah.
So they don't have to out themselves as the guy that made the really stupid argument on the Atheist Experience. Some people choose to do that. And
Well, it's a handful that can't remain anonymous, like Ray Comfort or
Yeah.
Matt Slicker.
yeah, those are pretty rare occasions.
Yeah, they've already made their bed.
But yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned tone trolling because there's a hierarchy of disagreement here, with name calling being at the bottom. Ad hominem is next, and tone trolling is right above ad hominem. So if you're tone trolling, you're still in the hierarchy of bad arguments.
And tone trolling, by the way, is, for those who aren't aware, is this idea of saying, well, I agree with your message, but the way you're saying it is counterproductive.
Yeah.
And it may in fact be counterproductive, but if you don't have any way of supporting that claim, like I hear all the time, for any given phone call, we might hear, oh, you guys are incredibly patient and amazing, and that was the best phone call ever. Or on the same phone call, we might hear from somebody else, you guys are a bunch of assholes. If you think you're doing anything good or you're going to convince anybody, then you're just wrong. You're never going to convince, first of all, there are people who say you're never going to convince religious people.
Right.
Funny, my inbox is full of emails from people just like that, and everywhere I go and every place that I speak, people come up and say that we have in fact done that. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Then there are some that say you'll never convince them with the particular tactics that you're using, as if we only use a single tactic here.
Yeah.
And you're wrong on that too. So.
Yeah. Yeah, so there's name calling, ad hominem, responding to tone or tone trolling.
Yep.
Right above that is contradiction. So,
simple contradiction like nuh-uh.
Yeah, nuh-uh. Yeah. So if someone says you'll never convince anyone, you're doing more harm than good, and we just said nuh-uh, then that would be contradiction, not a very strong argument. Then there's counter-argument, where Matt points out we have an inbox full of emails from former theists who responded to our arguments. So there. Then there's refutation, which explains, finds the mistake, explains why it's mistaken using quotes. And we do that frequently on the blog. And then there's refuting the central point, which explicitly refutes the central point that the person is making.
Yeah, and that's the one that's difficult to get to by the nature of the subject sometimes.
Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
So that's the hierarchy of disagreement. And
there we go.
All right.
And now you know. Knowing is half the battle.
Yeah.
G.I. Joe. Or it's in the Library of Congress. Read more about disagreements in your library.
That's right.
I have flashback into my Saturday mornings, but